After a skydiving accident nearly robbed Rex Steven Sikes of his life and caused him to spiral down in negativity for a couple of years, Rex locked himself in his apartment for over 6 weeks to sort things through and develop the confidence to face the world again, living happily and successfully. During those weeks of deep introspection and meditation, Sykes discovered the keys for transformation, which he's shared around the world ever since. He discusses this in his book. It's hard to say. Life on Your Terms. Live the life you want. And he will also discuss that today on the Essential Coaching Skills podcast. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. Hello, Rex.
Doug, it is so wonderful to see you and be with you again.
It's nice to see you as well. And you look like you're on the set. Is that like a Western set there or something?
The background, yeah, you know.
Because I know you are the amazing Rex. You do so much. It's amazing. And among them, you were an actor. You've been in. Well, you tell us. I know you've been in a Western because I've seen that on Facebook fairly recently, where you've been in a Western.
I've been acting professionally since I was about 18 years old.
I didn't know that.
Yes, really? Guild. And I act and I produce. I recently produced a movie called The Phenomenon, which is about UFOs and whether it's covered up or not. I was producers on that. I'm into this movie called Shooting Star that came out recently. It's on. Right now it's on Tubi and Roku and different places you can find it. But it came out, I don't know what the year release is. We did it pre-COVID and it just came out. And it might be 2019, it might be 2022. I have no idea. But yeah, I act and I produce.
Well, how about that?
I usually play the killer, the drug addict, the rapist, or something.
Oh, typecasting then, basically.
Well, it is. And now that I'm older, I play alcoholics and priests. So and
or alcoholic priests, as the case may be. Yeah, who are also drug addicts and rapists and killers and complex characters, you might just say. Well, and to think that I thought you were an NLP trainer. It's
yeah, well, you know.
So this is the Essential Coaching Skills podcast. What the heck are you doing here, Rex?
I'm trying to learn essential skills. And where better to learn than from you?
Well, that's a very good point. So you are a professional actor since you're 18, and that's been a couple years. So where along that spectrum did you come across this NLP stuff?
Oh, I was about 24, 25, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I had a crisis. I write about it in the book, Life on Your Terms. One of many. I mean, you know, it's just the one I wrote about, but it was the precipitating event that got me involved in a lot of this. From the time I was a child, I wanted to be a mystic and an actor, the two things I seem to have been able to accomplish in my life. And
a mystic.
And I got into hypnosis when I was 11. My dentist was a hypnotist. My father introduced me to a stage hypnotist. And so I started practicing. I actually started teaching hypnosis, you know, as a teenager to you know, like YMCA classes and things like that. Wow. And but when I was 25, I had this crisis that I write about, the skydiving accident, and it wasn't the accident, it was the aftermath that was the problem. And I locked myself in my room after a period of time for well over 6 weeks to try and sort things out and figure out what was going wrong in my life. And because I had a background in hypnosis and meditation and law of attraction, you know, I've been reading Napoleon Hill's every day since I was a kid too. I just used everything I could to try and get my life back together, and it wasn't working real well. And then I hit on something that did make a huge difference, and I realized I was just asking myself the wrong questions. I was saying, why did this happen to me? Why does life suck? How come nothing ever works out? Why did I do this? How did this happen? Why does the girl that left? You know, how did I lose my career? I realized I didn't want to. At about 3 weeks into it, I realized I don't want to know those questions.
Right.
What the heck do I want to know that about? I want to know, how can I get my life back? How soon can I feel better? In what ways can I discover confidence? I discovered for myself that life was really about setting a direction, which
Wow.
direction. So,
That's like totally NLP right there. So you sort of invented NLP rather than.
my acting coach actually knew more about NLP, and I started with her in '74. And we talk about, hey, if you're looking up to get your line, you're seeing your lines, you know,
Right.
all sorts of stuff. She'd say, stop the eye movements because on
It's
camera,
74.
1974. Yeah, I studied with her from '74 to '84, and we remained
Wow.
friends to the end of her life. Her name was Lillian Chauvin. She was from France. She was a brilliant, wonderful, incredible person. And Napoleon Hill. Here's the other thing: is if you look back into the history, almost all of NLP is in so many different places. It's in the work of Hill and Robert Collier. The notion of modeling, it comes many years before NLP was ever invented. So when I got to when I got to around 1980 is when 79 I read Frogs and the Princess, I think it was. In 1980 I started doing workshops in NLP, and I also moved to a commune, and we were practicing NLP, going to workshops with NLP and training and things like that, and coming back and sharing it with each other. And we had a university. So
wait a second now. You had a NLP commune. There was a commune that you
no. It was the Rajneesh commune in Oregon back in 1980, between 80
But you
and
did NLP seminars from via Rajneesh?
it was actually 81 when they used it. Yeah, well, the commune was comprised of therapists and like myself and everybody else, and literally some of the most important therapists around the world who'd chosen to take sannyas and leave their everyday life of working in wherever they were and move to either Pune, India, or to ultimately Rajneeshpuram, Oregon. And so we had a collective of just incredible. I mean, I've done every kind of imaginal kind of therapy and body work and energy practice that you can imagine in the 4 or 5 years that we were there. And so NLP was part of that, because we would come and go all the time and go to workshops and go out and come back and introduce things, and it was amazing. It's an amazing journey.
And who were you taking NLP workshops from?
Well, whoever they were at the early time. I mean, I don't remember all the people at that time.
Well, you remember some. Bandler, Grinder?
Huh?
Bandler, Grinder?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately Bandler. And then I worked with Richard for a long time, or we presented programs together and did DHE together and stuff like that. But in the early days, a lot of them were unsung heroes. We would learn from other people, and then or study with master practitioners or things like that. I mean, there was just a whole bunch of where I first learned was not. I didn't go to an official training. I learned from all these other collectives, and then said, I think I want to do this. I want to do this training.
Wow, how fascinating!
Yeah.
Wow! I had no idea about that stuff. I'm so glad I asked.
And then I did work for. I was a trainer for. At that time there was a society, and there was NANELP, and there was all sorts of political stuff, and so I was a trainer for both, actually. And that created no end of interest.
And you're still alive to talk about it. That's pretty impressive.
That is probably the most impressive part of it.
Wow, that's so very interesting. I mean, I never even heard of NLP till like the mid '80s. Well, I thought I was an early adapter.
The mid '80s is when it started to really kind of catch on, and even for me. But I mean, in the mid '80s, I was teaching seminars already. I started presenting NLP. I ran a meditation center off the ranch as well, and so I would present NLP principles and practices, and hypnosis principles, practice, and meditation. And by the mid '80s, it was pretty well locked in. And then at that time too, a lot of practitioners were a month long.
Yeah, I know. Mine was 15 days. I thought it was pretty long, but short. Those comparisons. Golly, it's so interesting. And one thing you said, I also was a follower of a guru back in the late 70s and early 80s. Guru Maharaji was his name.
Oh, sure.
But I had no idea.
The young child?
Yeah, he was like 14 or something at the time.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, I was in college. I met some premies, Anyway, it was good. It was a good time. It was actually a really good learning to learn to meditate like that.
I think in light of everything I've ever done, my spiritual journey, I fell in love with Rajneesh, who is now known as Osho.
Right.
And people always ask, well, did they ask you to give your money or your soul or your anything? And nobody ever asked me for a dime. I mean, I was never asked to do anything, never told to do anything. It's like your relationship with the guru is your relationship, and that's how I always felt about it. But I had spent time in South Fallsburg with Muktananda for 3
months.
Me
too. Yeah,
for
not
3
far
months.
from here.
And Satchidananda, who is I think resident in New York, I spent time with him. Krishnamurti, I would spend time in Ojai with him when he was there. So, but I fell in love with Osho, and to this day,
it's beautiful teachings. It really is beautiful teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to South Fallsburg and chanted with Guru Ma and Guru Mai.
Yes, right. Yeah, there was Mukti and what was her name before she changed it?
Chitravananda.
Yeah, but I mean, and they had not yet. I mean, Muktananda was still alive and hadn't taken things over yet. Changed things, and they thought it would go to the boy, but it went to multi. And she became Guru Mai.
Right. Yeah.
And while I was there, Marsha Mason, the actress, and Anthony Zerbe were there for a time. So I was like, there's actors here. There's everybody from every walk of life, and you spent time there. It was very austere in some ways. I mean,
I did. I spent some time in South Fallsburg, and she also did some, satsangs in Manhattan at the Manhattan Center, which coincidentally was the same venue where I first learned NLP from Tony Robbins back in '85.
Oh, wow.
The Manhattan Center on 34th Street in Manhattan.
Wow, that's cool. Well, Osho had centers in Laguna and Westwood, California, so that was always cool. Muktananda had a big tent revival or something on the beach in Santa Monica for a long time, and then they had a center in Santa Monica. We would go there for. Were you told? And nobody's going to appreciate this, but you might. When I was first going there, it was 1980, 81. I went to Muktananda first, and then I went to the ranch. And so I was in Manhattan. I was living in Manhattan, actually at Larry David's apartment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a friend of mine, Chris, and Larry swapped apartments. Larry took his Brentwood apartment. Chris took his New York apartment.
Nice.
But all the people from Seinfeld, the characters that later became one of the writers, and Kramer, Kenny Kramer lived there.
Oh my God!
And so we would be sitting in Chris was a drummer, and he had a soundproof thing built in his apartment and everything, and we'd be in his apartment, and the door would come swinging open, and a guy named Jimmy would come sliding in like Kramer and go, "Oh, come," and we'd run out and we'd follow him down the hallway to his apartment where he was a writer. He wanted to write screenplays and comedy, and so we would all sit over his head and look at the typewriter of what he had written, and then go back. And Kenny Kramer lived at the opposite end, and Kenny was just a person. I mean, but he ended up with a namesake on the show. Jimmy was most like him on the show. And but I went to South Fallsburg, and as I was going, a friend of mine who had been there said, "You're going to hate breakfast, but you'll love everything else." And breakfast was sour cereal. And I love the sour cereal, and I actually hated everything else.
Well, there you go. It's all a matter of taste. Hey, let's talk a little bit more about NLP and stuff, because this is the coaching.
Yeah.
Continue this
I understand that this is life, and we're sharing moments, and we're laughing, and we're having a good time, and I can't think of a better way to begin a coaching session than to begin with some laughter. And
that's really true. Really, ultimately true. And but I did want to ask you, how do you see the connection between these things, between NLP and coaching and spirituality and meditations and that sort of thing?
It's kind of all the same thing. It's like language, but different languages.
Okay.
So they all have their own unique benefits, their own unique problems, their own unique offerings, and they all address, whatever the focus is. So meditation to me is about letting go and releasing and allowing, and NLP, or the law of attraction, tends to be about making adjustments, but that doesn't mean you can't do it in a state of let go or in release. So there's ways that these things work together depending on the facilitator, or who's practicing it. it's how you blend it. It's kind of like some people like their food all separate on a plate and they eat one food at a time, and other people, put it in the like dinner at the commune, Muktan's commune. They just blend the lunch, and then you eat it. So um, it's all of value, and then it's just a matter of the path that people choose. I think that the main thing that I would like to see more of is benevolent, compassionate facilitators of change who aren't so much into, you have to, my philosophy is you have to be it to do it to have it. I mean, and I'm not the only one, obviously, but when you are it, when it arises from you, then you naturally do what you need to do in order to get what you want to have. And so many presenters of self-help out there, put themselves in the place of saying, if you want a car, you want a house, you want the jewelry, you want the watch, you want the girl, you want the guy, you want this, you want that, then you have to do this stuff and do this a lot and sacrifice and work really hard and give up your family and your free time and your leisure, whatever, so that you can be important, so you can be the kind of person who owns that, so you can have power and have money. And I think it's absolutely the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more that people approach this from a release, a let go and allow, and this or something better, is possible, then how they get there, whether they use a ladder or an elevator, doesn't really make much difference, because they're doing it. And so NLP and hypnosis and meditation and tapping, I mean, all these different kinds of things that are out there are of great value. They can also, just so you know, they can also be stepping stones as well as kind of blocks for people, like meaning that a person can get entrenched and go, this is the only way that I know how to do something. And there are many ways. It's like all roads lead to Rome. It's just which one do you want to take to get there?
Yeah, I've looked for Rome, and unfortunately, I live in New York State, so the Rome that it led to is the Rome, New York, and a little anticlimactic. So,
well, Rome, Wisconsin is an intersection.
So, you and I also have something else in common. We both studied at one point or another with Dave Dobson.
Yeah,
Few people have heard of these days, but he was quite a guy.
I was lucky in about the mid '80s when that happened, and Dave was a wonderful guy. And I don't remember how soon I saw him before he passed, but we had a dinner or something in Illinois or somewhere, and what an amazing man, and the unsung hero in neurolinguistic programming. Many of the stories that other people have co-opted were Dave's stories.
So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about, because not too many people know him. He had a funny quirk about not wanting people to steal his stuff or whatever. So he wrote a book, but he never published it. It's really hard to get any sort of material of his stuff. So tell us, he's the unsung hero of NLP. Like what?
Well, I mean, my understanding of it from him, was that he did all the burn stuff. He worked in the burn unit. He did traditional hypnosis as well as his own innovation stuff. And then these stories come out, or like when so and so would say, "Well, when I was in the burn unit, they weren't." That was Dave's story. And I hope you appreciate this, but you will recall, I'm sure, that in the early days of NLP, anybody's story was fair game because they considered a teaching experience or medical. So if you, for example, were at the beach and something happened and you said, "I'm at the beach," so and so may have said, "Well, when I was at the beach," I might say, "Well, when I was at the beach," and we just made the story our own instead of saying, "Well, when Doug was at the beach, this happened."
Right.
So, but that got lost, and some people got all the stories attributed to them as if they did everything, and no one did anything else. And Dave is one of those people who had all these incredible stories and experiences that he brought to the field, and then nobody, maybe for that very reason, nobody said, "Oh, Dave, Dave is an important piece." They got Milton, they got Virginia, they kind of say Fritz Perls, but Dave was just lost.
Yeah, and Frank Fairley. Let's not forget about him. He also
Frank got a little bit of attention in the early days, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Frank was from Wisconsin.
I know he was not far from me, and I never actually met Frank.
Oh no, he is great.
Not that I'm aware of, and when I found out he was in Wisconsin, I was like, I should do something about it, and then I never did.
Yeah. Because yes, you have an amazing history. You are, as people are probably picking up, in Wisconsin, and
Currently.
you also have a place in Hollywood or LA at least, right? You've done a lot of work there. Tell us a little bit more about Dave. What did you learn from him that you then started to use in your own training and stuff? Because you're known for really masterful communication, and I think Dave, his other than conscious communication is OTCC,
Well,
is really what it's about.
definitely that. I mean, definitely he was the idea of communicating with aspects of another person was very different from anything that I'd gotten from neurolinguistic programming or anything else. The acknowledgement, the rapport that you could create with another, truly phenomenal and remarkable uh, piece of learning that
Yeah.
even today I don't think many people see it or get it. I don't consciously present it today. I did earlier, but I haven't in really in years. Um, One is because lately everything's online is a lot different kind of experience than doing
Yeah,
it.
for sure. Yeah.
The other, I think, was the idea, and I don't know whether it was his original idea or not. It's the milking stool, the idea of balance, and balancing out the the systems, the sensory systems are trying to be congruent in each system, which
Right.
I don't. I adopted that for a long time, and then I kind of went, maybe, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong. I want to make sure that I think it's wonderful, but I don't know that it's absolutely necessary. But anytime that you can create a more harmonious, aligned, congruent experience for yourself with your own self, um, better. And Dave talked about that. It seemed like the early days of NLP, people were so interested in doing things and having people make changes and trying these approaches and making, what technique does this and what technique. And Dave just kind of went, the human being is phenomenal and beyond anything that we know. And there's ways to communicate with it. And you need a good relationship with yourself. And then you can communicate better with other people. I mean, that's my experience. And he was quite a rascal in how he presented it.
He was indeed a rascal is a good term for Dave. Yeah, he was a bit of a curmudgeon, but
I'm trying to pinch.
thank you. Yeah, so it's funny because some of the stories that Dave told, and I'll try to tell the story without mentioning any names, but he told us once in class at his class fun shop that I took with Dave that he was working with some of the early giants of the NLP world, whose names I will not mention, and he had told some stories about his working like at the burn unit and that sort of thing, and then later he was listening to somebody else, one of those giants of the NLP world, telling the same story, and as if he had done those things, and people were going like, "Oh wow, that's amazing," and listening to the story as if said person had done those things. And Dave was good at expressing anger. I don't know if you remember that about Dave. he was good at that. He had a real facility for expressing anger. So the way he told the story is that he went over to said person and said, "God damn it," said person, "if you want some experience, go get some." And so that is why in the 90s, I went to a hospital in New York City, and I didn't work in a burn unit. I worked in a cardiothoracic unit where I did pre-surgical hypnosis for patients.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And he's right. There's nothing like experience. Stories are the next best thing, or maybe hypnosis is the next best thing, and then stories are the next best thing, or both. But experience, it's different.
Well, I can't disagree with any of that. There's no shortage of experience. People always talk like the law of attraction, the secret. It's think and grow rich, and I love that. And then people say, "Well, you got to take action." I'm like, or that the secret to the secret of think and grow rich is action. And I go, no, action is always the next step. If you want a glass of water, you either have to ask for it, or you have to get up and get it. You always have to take some action, but it is based on the thoughts that you're thinking. There you go, and I'll join you. And so the point is, there's no shortage or no excuse for not getting experience or applying what you learn. Because if you don't apply it, it's completely meaningless. It becomes a story that you might tell. And sadly, well, back when I created Idea Seminars, when I founded Idea Seminars, And for many years, I worked with Richard, but when the internet started, there was so much myth and so much misinformation, and so many people who had never taken a practitioner, people who I knew today
Mm.
who still have never taken a practitioner course, who call themselves NLP trainers, master trainers, practitioners, master practitioners, and they've never stepped inside a program or even listened to an audio program or gotten my home
Get
study.
out of here.
No, there are many of them. So
Mm.
I kind of made it my mission, whether it was a law of attraction, meditation, hypnosis, NLP, whatever I could, to demystify it as much as possible without having to name names. I mean, because it's not about, taking someone down. It's about building other people up and trying to provide them a pathway that they can move in successfully. There are people in the world who actually put hurdles down on a track and run around and try and jump over them in order to win a gold medal. So, obstacles in life aren't things to be avoided. They're things to be,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like from your book that some of the obstacles that life threw at you became very important for you.
Steve Jobs said it right, or I think it was Steve Jobs who said you can't connect the dots forward, but you can backward. Everything I have absolutely no regrets. I mean, there are things that if at one time I said I wish this had never happened, or while I was going through it, I was just horrified by it. I have since learned and embraced that everything, and while it's a trite aphorism, it doesn't have to be, that things happen for you, not to you. And whether they do or not, it's as Viktor Frankl, man's search for meaning. We are meaning makers and time binders. And so how we view things, and we're egocentric, ethnocentric, chronocentric. I mean, we're all these things. So we extract from it. So anything and everything that's ever happened to me in my life has been value, including whatever I'm going through today. And what I try and train people to do is that if I said, "What's your name?" you'd say Doug, right? And if I said, "Are you a man or a woman?" you'd probably say man. If I said, "How tall are you?" you'd say, "I'm this tall." If I said, "Where are you right now?" you'd say, "I'm right here," or "I'm in New York," or whatever. You know that it's at the tip of your brain. It's in your DNA. You don't have to go, I'm who, right? That's how when bad things happen, if you can go, wow, an adventure appears, and I'm so grateful for this. If you can do that like you do with your name, now you're on top of things. Now you're changing. Now you're being able to live life well, because if you have to struggle through it, you're in that conscious, competent phase, which is fine. It's all the learning stuff. But it's where we talk ourselves through it. It's where we have a foot on the dock and a foot on the boat, and we're not really getting anywhere. And then somehow something changes, and we either just avow it or hate it, or go, "Oh my God, I survived it," or we go, "Wow, all of this has been truly part of an incredible journey."
Yeah.
Like I'm just gonna say,
your dog seems very happy right now.
She's liking to scratch the rug carpet for some reason. Hey, Bailey.
I thought she was chewing on a bone.
No. She's like clawing at the carpet. I'm so blessed to have the two most incredible dogs in the world. They're just gorgeous. Nice. Oh my God, what companions! And smart and kind and loving. But what I was going to say was, I don't remember. It'll come to me.
It reminds me of a story.
And the value of a pattern interrupt.
I remember Dave Dobson saying that there are two things that happen to you in life when you get older. One is that your memory starts to go.
What?
One of them is that your memory starts to go. And the other one is
it's gone. I love it. Yeah,
good old Dave.
But we were talking about things that happen. I always say it's dog shit or diamonds. You have a choice, and it's because based on my experience in my apartment, it's about direction. Do I want to choose dog shit? Do I want to choose diamonds? And every moment of the day, of every moment of my life, I have the choice. And I remembered what I was going to say. When I was a child, and this is a common experience for many, many people, parents would take us on a road trip. I would lie down on the floor in the back of the car and go, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we?" And even in my early days of traveling and career and things, where I'd be on a plane all the time, I hated to travel. I hated to get there. It was okay for me to get there and be there, but I didn't want to get there. I didn't want to check into a hotel. I didn't want to take a cab. I didn't want to be on a plane. I didn't want to do any. I didn't want to pack. I didn't want to unpack. I just wanted to be there, teleport. What I've learned is that there's no substitute for the journey. the destination, you always have a great destination that you want to accomplish, in your life, but you may or may not get there during this lifetime.
Hmm.
How you journey is what's most important. It's
That's nice.
and because everybody dies in the middle of something, right? The very few people get to complete what they're doing, and so let's make the moments magical, miraculous, magnificent, and memorable, and celebrate everything. Because if you consider something a problem, it's a problem. If you consider something a blessing, it can be a blessing. And it's all how you look at it. And that's the value of what I've learned from meditation and NLP and hypnosis and Dobson and all these incredible people, and Napoleon Hill and the law of attraction and Muktananda and Satchidananda and Buddha and Osho, is that there's no substitute for here and now.
Beautiful. Yeah. My friend Dan Millman teaches that all the time. In fact, he's got a little clock that says, now, 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 now.
Right. Well, I mean, people fail to realize that there is no past and there is no present. I mean, energy is equally distributed here, now, then, and there, but time is a human concept. There's no time without.
Oh, yeah. I know. I was teaching yesterday in my NLP class, I was teaching a timeline. And they said, this is all made up, right? This is all made up. We invented time. Human beings invented time. And we can do with it what we want. But it's always now. It's always here. Where are you? Here. Where? What time is it? Now. Always. No matter where you go, there you are.
Well, and that's very beautiful. And I read a book back in the 70s. Two things really kind of changed my life in terms of just accidental articles. I'll mention those in a second. But people. I always tell people, if you drag around your past, your hurts and all that stuff, it's like if you wore every single piece of clothing you've ever had in your life, you wouldn't be able to move right now.
Right.
And yet people do that. They and sometimes they're proud of it. You have no idea what I suffered through or how bad they don't want it, they don't like it, but they're familiar with the pain and the discomfort, and it's their comfort zone, and so they don't leave it even though they suffer in it, and that's truly sad. But in the past, when they were going through whatever it was, they weren't going through that in the past. They were going through that in the present. And the same thing will be true when you get to your future. That future won't be in your future. It will be the present moment. So two things I read. The one was somebody said, how do I live in the present? I wish I could remember the source, but they said, how do I live in the present? If I have a meeting, I know I have a meeting in the future. They go, well, you plan your meeting now. And when you're in the meeting, you're in the now. So don't worry about it. You're always going to be in the now. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I can plan for the future in the moment, knowing that that's what I'm doing, but I'm enjoying this moment. Okay. Right. The other thing was a magazine from Leonard Orr, who was the founder of one of the founders of the Immortal Movement kind of thing.
Yep.
And I found it and I tossed it in a drawer. I went, oh, this is bullshit. And I threw it in a drawer. And when I was moving, I pulled it out and I happened to kind of flip through it and I read it and I went, the one thing I've remembered to this day, and I remember very little else, is he said, some people fall out of an airplane and get up and walk away. They survive. I actually had a girlfriend who did that, fell like from a mile up and lived.
Oh my God, really?
Oh yeah, and lived and didn't kill herself. I mean, didn't break everything and bone her body. It was amazing. Right. The chute didn't open. And you know how I found out about it? I was walking through the living room and it was on hard copy. and they mentioned this name and I went, what? She was a girl that, we spent a lot of time together at one time. And yeah, she had. And
she had never mentioned to you that, oh, by the way, I fell in a mile.
No, this was afterwards. I was married at this time.
Oh, okay.
So this was afterwards, but I was like, holy crap. Right? But he said, some people fall out of an airplane and live, and other people trip over the carpet in their living room and die.
Yeah, that's
true. I have a question for you. What is a good height to die from? And I was like, because it's all about our beliefs. And so really what my work has been about for 40 years has been about the placebo. I got into the whole notion of attitude and the placebo and belief at the time, and how our beliefs shape and what we see in the world. So, and that's what the book is about, is how we change these things or embrace these, so that if you do consider something a problem, that's as much a placebo effect as if you took a placebo, and by the way, it's the placebo, this, but the placebo effect is not the element, the inert little pill or whatever it is, or the amulet. It is an effect that says you can't ever divorce the placebo effect from anything. So whether you're doing an NLP technique, a hypnosis technique, or medical technique, or whatever, your attitude toward it determines a lot of the outcome. And I stumbled onto this stuff with the study I mean, there was Bernie Siegel and Norman Cousins. I mean, all these people, but Travis Air Force Base is one of the studies I love to quote. Did a study on 157 cancer patients and determined after the study that attitude toward the treatment was a greater predictor of the success of the treatment than anything else. So it meant that if you decided that this was going to work, it was more likely to work than it. And so now we know there's placebo and nocebo. And do you know that somebody wrote a book, and in it I'm criticized because I said back in the 90s, I said our goal, or in the 80s, I said our goal is to try and make the placebo effect conscious so that we can use the placebo effect deliberately, knowing that we are creating good thoughts and good beliefs and good attitude. And they went, oh, this is such bullshit, And I'm like, okay, you missed the point, but okay.
Yeah, because that's, it's funny because that's in a sense exactly what we were doing during the pre-surgical work with the patients at the hospital. We were saying, and this is perfect. You're in the right place, doing the right thing. This is going to be great for you. And that's a large part of what the hypnosis was about. And it worked. When we first started this, just as an aside, this was whole Columbia Presbyterian's Complementary Care Center was wow. Under the auspices of this guy named Dr. Oz. Back in the 90s, he was a surgeon and unknown to people except because he was a great surgeon. And he was a great surgeon and probably still is. But, he was interested in what he and others, he wasn't the only one, were interested in what alternative medicines could be used in a hospital setting. So they wanted to get practitioners in. I had no business being there. I was a musician who turned into an NLP guy, studied hypnosis. But, they wanted to get practitioners in who did these things to see what worked in a hospital setting. So it was complementary care. Later became integrative medicine. They had everything at the beginning. They had massage, they had Qigong, they had, you name it, it was there, pretty much. But the two things that were there at the bitter end when they were no longer studying things, but they were just offering them to patients, were massage and hypnosis. Those are the two things that actually stood the test of time, because we got people to feel better, have better results, leave the hospital quicker. It worked. It actually worked. Not that they didn't get medicine too. They got the medicine, they got the surgery, they got all those things, but they had a positive attitude about those things, and it got them out of the hospital faster with better results.
That's so beautiful. And I'm so glad that you shared that here and now with me, because that's really wonderful. I think that my work, and I know your work, is more about waking people up to possibilities than actually trying to get them into a trance. I mean, that's, what I mean? It's like, how do we, can everybody be hypnotized? To go, you mean what, again? I mean, you already know.
Yeah, exactly. As Dobson used to say, it's not about hypnosis, it's about dehypnosis.
Yes, exactly. And the idea being that, from the time that we're born, we're literally in, different brainwave patterns, and delta for the first couple of years, and theta, we're absorbing, like as if we were hypnotized, all the stuff around us. Mm. So that's, Aristotle said, show me the 7-year-old child and I'll show you the adult. And today, most personality theory says, well, your personality is set by the time you're 7. Why? Because we've neural wired in these habits, mental thought habits, feeling habits, behavior patterns, speech patterns that we learned while in this, young stage. And now the question is, or what I attempt to do, I know what you attempt to do, is help people recondition and retrain themselves. And there's no shortage going back to experience. You can't do it without the experience of doing it. You actually have to do it. So whether you use hypnosis to do it, or NLP to do it, or meditation to do it, or some other approach, the idea is to help people to awaken to the infinite possibilities and resourcefulness and possibilities and opportunities and resourcefulness within them that's already there, but so often hidden. They just don't see it because of the conditioning. And so that's beautiful. I had a Swami friend from the ranch, from Rajneesh, who was a hypnotist. He lived in New Orleans, and he very, very successful he was in a psychological group or therapy group. I don't remember, he was practicing there in a hospital, and he was getting incredible results because of his ability to hypnotize, and he had learned NLP. And at some point, the facility found out he was using hypnosis. They didn't know much about NLP, so they didn't know what it was, but you're using hypnosis, so you're gone. And they fired him. So he left the facility. But guess who they called in to consult? They called him in. And he went to another. I mean, it was just the most amazing thing. They couldn't officially have him there because he was doing, something, that not proven or whatever. But they could call him in to consult and do all these other things. And so he did that for then he went back.
In fairness, that was probably true in the hospital I worked in as well. We didn't call what I did hypnosis.
Right.
We called it, guided imagery and things like that, mindfulness practice or whatever.
Well, and interestingly enough, back in the 80s and maybe in the 90s, there was a woman, I won't mention her name, but a politician who wanted to outlaw all closed eye practices in school for kids. So guided imagery, mindfulness wasn't a term back then. Mindfulness is a brand more than anything. I mean, it's useful. I mean, it's been attributed to someone as opposed to meditation or Zen. It's been around forever. But there wasn't that. But closed eyes, and it created that issue of, well, if you asked a child, what's your address, and they went and accessed it, that they were somehow doing something wrong. It was of the devil, to use their imagination. Yeah, it was spooky time. It was back in the early 80s or late 80s. It was during the Reagan administration. This came to the forefront.
Well, thank God we're enlightened now that all that
you would hope.
That's
beautiful. In the 70s, 80s, I worked with Pat Collins, the hypnotist, in the early 80s too, and helped teach her self-hypnosis classes. And at that time, in the 70s and 80s, in California, in the hospitals, they often had signs that would say, "Be careful, your patients can hear you while under anesthesia."
Yeah.
Mind the doctors. And I write about a circumstance where I confront doctors in my book, going, "Hey, your patient can hear you. You think you should be, all that talking about what a shitty condition he's in when he can hear you? What makes you think he can hear me?" And I had set up finger signals with him while he was in a coma.
Wow.
And they were like, and when they said, "Well, prove it," and I was like, "Okay, I hope this works." Well, when it did, they were like, "Oh my God," and they then treated me as if I were a god. And I kept saying, "Don't tell me what you're going to do for the guy. Tell his family. I'm just here."
No, that's true.
They had their model shattered for a moment, at least.
No, it's interesting. Dr. Oz is actually a fairly cool guy. At least he was. He said that he was once in surgery, doing heart surgery. The guy was totally anesthetized, and I've seen totally anesthetized people. It's like, is that a corpse? They're just motionless, not moving, barely breathing. And this guy was out. He's open heart surgery happening, but he was bleeding too much. And so Oz said, so I leaned over and said, "Bob, you can stop that bleeding now. Go ahead and stop that bleeding now, Bob." And he did. And so we during this period of time that I was there, we set up a study where we would have, with headphones during surgery, they'd give them word pairings. So instead of the opposite, black, white, we'd have black, brown. And we'd repeat that a bunch of times on the tape during surgery. So these people would go, and then we'd give them a test afterwards. So just out of curiosity, just do this little word pairing test. They didn't have a clue what it was about. We didn't tell them we were going to be doing what we did. They signed up for a study, but they didn't know specifically what the study was. And so it was amazing to see how many times people would, when you think of the word black, what do you think of? Most people, if they hadn't gone through this, would be, black, white, whatever. And it's amazing that it wasn't like everybody, but a much higher number than you'd expect were giving the word pairings that we had into the tape.
I'll share a study that Thelma Moss, I worked with her for a long time. She wrote The Body Electric. She was a
yeah. I remember that.
I loved her. She spent years with her. But let me first tell you a story. I still have the scar. Before I got married, I was in my fiance, prior to even being a fiance's apartment, and doing dishes, and she didn't have a dishwasher, so I was washing in the sink, and a bowl broke something, and it severed between my fingers, and it was big cracked open like that, and it was pouring blood, and I didn't know it, and I pulled my hand out and went, "Stop!" And it did. And the weird part about it is we got to the hospital to stitch, and the doctor is like, how did you stop it? She goes, "He yelled at it." He yelled, "Stop," and it stopped. And the guy's like, "Really?"
That's pretty amazing.
More blown away. I mean, I was blown away too, but she was blown away. But I was like, "Stop."
Wow, so you invented hypnosis and NLP. That's amazing.
No, I didn't invent. But so much of this stuff is available to us. So that's the stuff that we just don't know. I mean, it's always been here. If it's eternally present, it's never been a moment that it hasn't been there. It just kind
That's
of
true.
unfolds or manifests in different ways. And mystics from long ago were doing all these things. They might not have the same language that they did, or
Right.
once we got televisions and radios, we could talk about some modalities differently than the experience. But you go back, you can find people saying make it big and bright, and all these kinds of things, but they didn't have the same kind of vernacular or understood. I mean, they understood what it was doing. They just didn't have the all the here's the list that you can draw from. So.
Yeah.
I remember people, talking about distance, for example, like pull it close or move it far away. I remember it big and bright and colorful and step into it, all this kind of stuff and feel these things and really feel like, I always tell people one of the most important things you can learn to do is learn to visualize and feel at the same time. So imagine doing chin-ups. And when you do a chin-up, imagine your fingers wrapping around, or climbing the ladder, or, doing something that. But you feel that, and if you can feel your fingers wrapping around the pole, then imagine what it takes to pull yourself up if you've ever done that. So they actually feel it in your muscles. Because a lot of people just go, okay, I got it. But that's not it. You actually have to imagine going through the thing so that you feel it. That's when, it's, I mean, I'm not going to say that it's more powerful, but that's when it seems that it helps people to unlock a lot of stuff, because now they have a feeling or kinesthetic or, whatever you want to call it, aspect to it that they otherwise, it's just this airy fairy kind of image in their head.
Yeah. Which is akin to what Erickson was doing when he learned to walk again after his polio. Hey, Rex, I'm realizing we're just about out of time.
Well,
we're just getting started here.
This has been a treat, and you have done so many incredible things, and I'm so glad to call you a friend and to hear experiences that I hadn't heard before.
I know.
Things that you've done and accomplished.
Would you be willing to come back and do this again sometime? Because really, I feel like we have just scratched the surface of what you have.
Absolutely, any time. This has been a wonderful, beautiful time for me. So I thank you and I'm honored to be here and privileged. Thank you.
Hey, in the meantime, if people want to get hold of you, how do they do that? Because I know you do a lot of coaching and work with people. So
do a lot of online stuff. I'm currently teaching a Napoleon Hill program. I'm starting another one, the Principles of Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich and that sort of thing. And I do, I've got the Ultimate NLP Home Study course online and how to get people to do what you want and mind design and other things. They just go to Rex Sikes, REXSIKES, my name, rexsikes.com. And they get a free gift when they get there, and I have a newsletter there as well. And
nice.
My book, if they get my book, I give away a free training. They get the book, they go to Amazon, they bring back their receipt code, and they get a $497 training on the mastery loop, which is mastering your thoughts, your feelings, your speech, your behaviors, and to maximize and increase the kind of results that you get.
And just, as a little plug for you, you'd make great products, because the first time I ever heard of you, Rex, is I got a tape set from the IDEA seminars that you did about public presentations and stuff. Michael Halbfish had turned me on to it. So
was it a true tape set? I mean, because we put a big one.
No, it was like I don't know.
Oh, it was the big sets, yeah.
24 sets, 24 tapes or something like that.
Yeah. Well, was that the Ultimate NLP Home Study course, or
I don't remember.
Because we put out training sets and master practitioner sets and everything.
I thought it was trainers training, like how to do presentations.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Good stuff.
I love doing that. That's training people to present.
Yeah,
it's just to make an application of all this stuff, and I love doing that. It's great to see people excel.
Yeah. All right, we're going to sign off. Thank you so much for being here. Really, really appreciate it. Really fun.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.